Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It had been a long, exhausting week, and I was looking forward to spending some quiet time away from the city. My best friend Lily had invited me to her family cabin in the mountains for the weekend, and I couldn't resist the offer. The idea of being surrounded by snow-covered trees, cozy fireplaces, and the stillness of nature seemed like the perfect antidote to the chaos of everyday life. The drive up was beautiful, with the snow gently falling as we passed through quaint villages and winding roads. We had been close friends for years, and I had always felt welcome in our family's home. But as we pulled up to the cabin, I realized that I had never really spent much time alone with her father. Richard had always been a quiet, reserved man, a gentle presence in the background of our group. He was Lily's dad, after all, and someone I had known for a long time. But we had never really had the chance to connect on a deeper level. He was the type of person who spoke with purpose when he said something, and even in casual conversation. You could feel the depth of his thoughts. Still, he had always been kind to me, and I respected him immensely. Lily, being her energetic self, quickly ran off to her room, excited about the weekend. Richard and I found ourselves standing in the living room, staring out the large windows at the snowy landscape. The quiet of the place seemed to encourage deeper reflections, and I could feel myself unwinding with each passing minute. "Nice to have some peace and quiet, huh?" Richard said, breaking the silence. I smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth in my chest. It's exactly what I needed. The world outside feels so calm. Richard nodded and moved closer to the fireplace, stoking the fire. "It's good for the soul," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "This place has a way of bringing you back to yourself." I followed him and sat down on the couch, glancing around at the rustic wooden walls, the cozy decor, and the inviting warmth that filled the room. The cabin felt like a refuge, a world apart from everything outside. Richard offered me a drink, and we spent a while chatting about life, family, and the simple pleasures of being surrounded by nature. As the night wore on, the snow outside grew heavier, and the wind howled against the cabin walls. It was clear that we were snowed in for the night, with no way of getting back to the city until morning. It felt like a blessing in disguise, a night to relax, to enjoy the company of people I cared about. At some point, Lily went to bed, leaving Richard and me sitting together by the fire. The flickering flames cast shadows on the walls, and the quiet was almost surreal. We spoke about life, his work, my ambitions, the challenges we both faced, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. It was easy to talk to him, easier than I had expected. As the evening wore on, Richard stood up and adjusted the blankets that had been neatly folded by the fireplace. "It's getting colder outside," he said. "Let's make sure you're comfortable. I'll grab another blanket for you." "Thank you," I said, my voice a little quieter than usual. The warmth of the fire and the calmness of the night had a way of making everything feel intimate. Richard returned a few minutes later, a soft, thick blanket in hand. When he sat back down beside me, the air between us felt charged with something unspoken, though neither of us acknowledged it. I pulled the blanket over my shoulders, grateful for the extra warmth. Richard adjusted the fire once more and then sat back down, his eyes meeting mine for a split second. "It's strange," he said after a moment, his voice low. "We've known each other for so long, but I don't think I've ever really gotten to know you beyond the surface level." I blinked in surprise, not expecting that from him. "What do you mean?" "Just that," he said, his gaze steady, but soft. "I know you as Lily's best friend, but I think there's more to you than just that. I've never really asked you about your life, your dreams, your fears. We've always been acquaintances, never more than that. But now, with the quiet and the snowstorm outside, it feels like an opportunity to really talk." I felt a flutter, a surprise, but also something else, a sense of being seen in a way I hadn't expected. There was a tenderness in his words, a depth that hadn't been there before. "I never really thought about it like that," I said softly. I guess I've always been focused on the here and now, the day-to-day stuff. But yeah, maybe it's time I told someone about my dreams. Richard smiled gently. It's never too late to start. The conversation grew quieter as the night stretched on, and for the first time, I felt a deep connection with Richard, not just as Lily's father, but as someone who understood what it was like to live with unspoken thoughts and feelings. We didn't need to rush things, and we didn't try to fill the silence. It was the kind of quiet that brought comfort, not tension. Eventually, we found ourselves seated closer, our knees nearly touching. The weight of the conversation seemed to shift, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of longing, of closeness I hadn't expected. The fire burned low, and the storm outside seemed to intensify, but inside I felt safe, enveloped by warmth and connection. You should rest, Richard said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. The snow's not going anywhere. I nodded, but as I stood up to leave, I hesitated for a moment. There was something about the way he looked at me, something that lingered between us, unspoken but undeniable. But instead of saying anything, I simply smiled. Good night, I whispered. Good night, he replied, his voice soft. The next morning, when I woke up, Richard was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. The snowstorm had stopped, and the sun was shining through the windows, casting a soft glow on the cabin. I walked in, stretching, and Richard greeted me with a warm smile. I made coffee, he said, offering me a cup. Thanks, I replied, feeling the quiet comfort of the morning settle in. It was as though everything had shifted overnight, and the distance between us had closed. I wasn't sure how to explain the shift in dynamics, but it felt like something important had happened. After a quiet breakfast, we packed up and prepared to leave. The car was covered in snow, but the roads were clear enough for us to make the drive back. As we loaded our bags into the car, Richard turned to me. I'm really glad we had this time together, he said softly. Me too, I replied, my heart full. I think it's something we both needed. And with that, we left the cabin, the peaceful memories of our time together lingering in the air. A quiet reminder that sometimes the best connections are the ones that develop unexpectedly in the most peaceful of moments. As we made our way down the mountain, the memories of the previous night and morning kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Richard and me, something subtle, but undeniable. It wasn't as though we had crossed a line or done anything inappropriate, but there had been a certain intimacy that had developed, a deepening of our connection that I had never expected. The car ride back was quiet, but comfortable. Richard kept his eyes on the road, and I found myself stealing glances at him from time to time. His features were more relaxed than usual, and he had that thoughtful expression that made him seem even more distant from the world around us. I couldn't help but notice how the moments we shared over the past day had made him feel more accessible, more present, in a way that had been missing before. As we drove through the snowy landscape, Richard suddenly spoke. I've been thinking about something, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I turned to look at him. What's that? I don't think I've ever really told you how much I appreciate your friendship with Lily, he continued. You've been a constant in her life, and I'm grateful for that. She talks about you all the time, and I can tell how much she looks up to you. His words warmed my heart. I care about her deeply. She's like family to me. I can see that, Richard replied. There was a pause, and then he added, It's just, I don't always know how to express it. I'm not the best with emotions, but I've always admired your patience and your understanding. It's something I'm grateful for, especially after everything. I smiled softly. It's easy to be patient and understanding when someone like Lily is around. She has a way of making everything feel right. Richard chuckled. She does, doesn't she? The conversation drifted into more casual topics, and I felt the warmth between us continue to grow. It wasn't just the fact that we had shared a quiet, intimate moment the night before. It was the way we had connected on a deeper level without needing to force anything. Our time at the cabin had opened up something within me, a sense of appreciation for Richard that went beyond surface level interactions. As we neared the city, I realized that though the weekend was over, the impact it had on me would stay with me for a long time. It wasn't about the location or the weather, it was about the space we had created for ourselves, the way we had been able to talk openly, honestly, and without distractions. When we finally reached the house, the familiar surroundings felt both comforting and bittersweet. I had grown fond of the quiet cabin and the peace it had brought, but I was also grateful to be back in the rhythm of everyday life. Lily was waiting for us when we entered, her eyes bright as she asked about the weekend. It was perfect, I said, smiling at her. Exactly what we needed. Richard gave me a soft look before turning to Lily. I'm glad you had a good time, he said. I think it did us both some good. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity, as we unloaded the car and settled back into normalcy. But as I glanced at Richard throughout the day, I couldn't help but feel that the bond we had formed during our time at the cabin was something lasting. It wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a new level of understanding and respect between us. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come in understanding what truly mattered in relationships. I had always thought of love in terms of big gestures and dramatic moments, but what I had learned during our time together was that real connection came in the quiet, thoughtful exchanges, the shared glances, the kind words, the gentle moments of vulnerability. As I looked around the table at Richard and Lily, I realized that love wasn't always about passion or fireworks. Sometimes it was about finding peace with someone, understanding them without needing words. It was about being there for each other in the most ordinary of moments. After dinner, Richard and I found ourselves on the porch, overlooking the city. Lights. The air had a crispness to it, and the night felt still and peaceful. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, Richard said, his voice low, about how important it is to show up for the people we care about. I nodded. I think we all forget sometimes, don't we? Life gets so busy, we get caught up in the noise. But it's the quiet moments that matter most. Yeah, he agreed softly. I think I've been neglecting those moments, thinking they didn't matter, but they do. They really do. There was a long pause, and I could feel the weight of his words settle into me. We didn't need to say more. The understanding between us was clear. Richard reached over, his hand brushing mine in a quiet gesture of affection. It wasn't anything overt or dramatic, but it spoke volumes about where we stood. I'm glad you're in our lives, he said quietly. You've always been a constant for Lily, and I appreciate that more than you know. I smiled at him, touched by his sincerity. I'll always be here for her, Richard. And for you, too. And as we stood there, side by side, under the night sky, I realized that the weekend had given me something more than just a chance to relax. It had deepened my appreciation for both Richard and Lily. What we had was built on trust, on quiet, support, and on the simple moments that made us feel understood and loved. And that was enough. As the days went on, life slowly began to return to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. The connection between Richard and I, though not obvious to anyone else, lingered beneath the surface. It was a soft understanding, an unspoken bond that had grown during that weekend we had spent together. We were back to our regular lives, but I couldn't shake the quiet intimacy that had developed between us, even though we had returned to our usual routines. I noticed that Richard seemed more present. He'd ask about my day more often, and there was a new depth to our conversations, like we were both finally seeing each other in a different light. It wasn't dramatic or overt, but there was an undeniable shift, one that made me feel more seen than I had in a long time. One evening after dinner, we all sat down in the living room to watch a movie. Lily was curled up on the couch with her book, occasionally glancing up at the screen, while Richard and I were on opposite sides of the room. There was a warmth between us, an ease that hadn't existed before. Every so often our eyes would meet, and there was this silent understanding that passed between us. I didn't know where it was going, but I wasn't in a rush to define it. This quiet closeness felt enough, and I could tell Richard felt it too. We didn't need to speak it out loud. Our actions, our shared moments, said everything we needed to know. After a while, Lily excused herself to go to bed, and the house fell into a peaceful silence. Richard and I sat in the living room, the TV playing quietly in the background. He turned to me, his face softening as he spoke. "You know," he said, his voice almost hesitant, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that weekend. About how love isn't just about big moments. It's in the little things, the quiet moments of connection." I looked at him, a smile forming on my lips. I think it's easy to forget that sometimes. We get caught up in everything: work, life, expectations. But it's those small moments that matter the most. Richard nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Yeah, I think that's why I've been so grateful for your presence in our lives. For me and for Lily, you've helped me see that the small things, being there for each other, listening, spending time together, those are the things that truly matter." There was a pause, and I could feel the weight of his words. His sincerity was clear, and it made my heart swell with warmth. "I'm glad I can be that for you," I said softly. "And I'm grateful to have you both in my life. You've taught me so much about patience, about what it means to truly be there for someone. And it's more than I ever expected." He smiled, his eyes meeting mine. "I'm just glad we found our way here, together." We sat there for a few moments in silence, letting the comfort of each other's presence settle in. It wasn't the kind of love that was defined by grand gestures or big moments. It was the kind of love that grew in the quiet, unnoticed spaces between. The lines of our everyday lives. Later that evening, we moved to the porch. The cool night air felt refreshing, and the sounds of the city were distant, almost non-existent. We leaned against the railing, side by side, our bodies close but not touching. There was a peace between us, a quiet contentment that spoke more than words could. "I've been thinking," Richard said softly, breaking the silence, "about how we've come since that weekend. About everything we've shared, the conversations, the connection. It feels different now, in a good way." I turned to look at him, a soft smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "I know what you mean. It's like we've reached a new level of understanding without having to say much." "Exactly," he replied, his eyes searching mine. "And I think I'm okay with that. We don't need to rush or figure everything out right away. It's enough to just be here together." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle within me. There was no need for more, no pressure to change or move faster than we were ready for. The love we had was steady, patient, and real. And in that quiet moment, I realized that it was everything I needed. "I feel the same," I said, my voice soft. "Being here with you, like this, it's enough. I'm happy with where we are." Richard smiled at me, his eyes warm with understanding. "Me too. I think we've learned that the little things matter more than anything. And I'm grateful for every moment we've shared." The rest of the evening passed in comfortable silence. We didn't need to fill the air with words. We simply enjoyed the peace, the warmth of being together. And as the night drew on, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the bond we had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and our connection only grew stronger. It wasn't just about the moments we spent together, but about the ways we supported each other in everyday life. We had become a team, one that communicated without hesitation, one that respected each other's space and desires. Lily continued to flourish as well, her art and creativity blossoming in ways we hadn't anticipated. I watched with pride as she pursued her passions, her confidence growing every day. It was clear that the bond between Richard and I had become a quiet but powerful foundation for both of us, and Lily was no exception. The love and support we had for each other had become the cornerstone of the life we were all building together. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Lily looked at Richard and me with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice quieter than usual. about how lucky I am. You two are always there for me. You've made me feel so loved and supported. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. Richard and I exchanged glances, our hearts full. We're proud of you, Lily, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And we're always here for you, no matter what. Richard nodded, his smile warm. You've brought so much joy into our lives. Watching you grow has been one of the best parts of this journey. Lily's eyes softened and she smiled at us both. Thanks, you two. I love you. And in that moment, I knew that this was love, not just between Richard and me, but for the whole family we had built together. It wasn't about perfection, but about showing up for each other every day. We had created something real, something that could withstand anything life threw our way. As the days went by, I continued to treasure these moments, quiet, peaceful, and filled with love. I knew that no matter where life took us, Richard and I would continue to grow together one step at a time. We were building something beautiful, something lasting. And that was all I needed. As the months passed, life seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Our little family was thriving, each of us carving out our individual paths while still finding time to be together. There was no rush, no pressure, just a shared understanding of how to balance the big moments with the small ones that mattered just as much. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed and the house had settled into its usual stillness, Richard and I found ourselves sitting on the porch again, the cool air wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. The sun had just dipped behind the horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with hues of orange and pink. The world around us was quiet, except for the occasional chirp of crickets in the distance. As I sat beside him, I felt that familiar warmth spread through me, the connection we had built over time never wavering. There was something deeply comforting about the way Richard was always there, quietly supporting me, understanding me without words. But there was also something more, a longing I hadn't realized had been simmering beneath the surface. Richard, I whispered, breaking the silence. His name felt like a soft prayer on my lips. He turned toward me, his eyes locking with mine, and I could see the same longing reflected in his gaze. We had spent so many nights like this together, but not fully together, but tonight felt different. There was a shift in the air, something charged between us, as though the space we had been holding between us was finally ready to collapse. I can't stop thinking about how much we've grown, I said, my voice quiet but filled with emotion. How much I've grown with you. Richard reached out and gently cupped my cheek, his touch tender yet intense. The moment his hand made contact with my skin, it felt like the world around us dissolved. There were no more distractions, no more hesitations. It was just us, our connection, our love. I feel the same way, he murmured, his voice low and filled with something deeper than just affection. You've become so much a part of me, Jen, more than I ever expected. Before I could respond, Richard leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was slow, almost reverent. It was a kiss that spoke of years of trust, of shared experiences, of everything that had led us here. His lips were warm and soft, and I could feel the depth of his feelings in every movement, every breath we shared. The kiss deepened, and with it, the intensity of the love between us seemed to ignite. Our hands roamed to each other instinctively, pulling one another closer, until we were tangled together, bodies pressed against each other with a hunger that had been growing for far too long. I could feel his heartbeat against mine, steady and strong, as though we were two halves of the same whole, finally coming together. His lips trailed down my neck, and I tilted my head back, giving him access, my body responding to his every touch. Every kiss. This was different from anything we had shared before. It wasn't just passion. It was a deep, primal connection, an understanding that we had crossed a threshold together, one that we had both been longing for. The desire between us was palpable, but so was the tenderness. Every touch was an expression of love, of wanting to be closer, of fully embracing everything we were to each other. Richard's hands were everywhere on my back, my waist, my hips, as he pulled me even closer until there was no space left between us. I could feel the intensity of the moment building, the need to be with him, to feel him, consuming me entirely. He kissed me again, his lips urgent now, as though he couldn't wait any longer. "I need you, Jeanne," he whispered against my lips, his breath hot and heavy. "I've always needed you." The words hit me hard, their sincerity driving me even closer to the edge. "I'm here, Richard," I breathed, pulling him back to me. "Always here." We moved inside the house, the night's quiet serenity only amplifying the heat between us. Every moment, every second was consumed with the longing to be closer, to fully merge our bodies and souls. Clothes were discarded, the air thick with desire and anticipation. But even in the rush, there was something sacred about the way we touched, the way we made love slow, passionate, a celebration of everything we had built together. As we came together, I felt like I was finally coming home. This wasn't just about physical connection. It was about the bond we had shared for so long, the love that had quietly evolved into something unshakable. Our bodies moved together in perfect harmony, and as the waves of passion crashed over us, I felt completely immersed in him, in us, in the love that had taken root and grown beyond anything I had ever imagined. In the aftermath, we lay there together, our bodies entwined, the cool night air brushing against our skin. Richard held me close, his arms around me, his heartbeat slowly returning to a steady rhythm. I could feel his breath against my neck, soft and content. "I've never loved you more than I do right now," Richard whispered, his voice thick. With emotion, I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle deep within me. "And I've never loved you more either," I whispered back. We lay in the quiet, in the peaceful aftermath of everything we had shared, knowing that this love wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a love that had been built on trust, on respect, on shared moments, and it would continue to grow and evolve, no matter where life took us. And as the night wore on, I knew that this was what we had always needed. Not just passion, but a love that was real, grounded in the simple yet profound connection we had created. A love that would endure no matter what.